temple and said, look, this temple is not how it's supposed to be. They're criticizing, the church at that time. And interestingly enough, many of the Jews separated from the temple services. This is why we see the community of Qumran. They were a society that separated from the temple services and initiated their own baptismal rites, ritualistic cleansings, apart from what they thought was an apostatized temple. So, it's interesting to look also at the other literature, the non-canonical literature at the time, apocryphal writings. Now, these are not inspired, they're not telling about the true movement of God, but it gives us an insight into what religious people of that day were thinking about. For example, there are in 1st Enoch and the Testament of Levi and all these strange books, they talk about how the heavens shall be opened and the glorious temple will come down from heaven and the Israel would be restored to its fullest. God will establish his kingdom and the Messiah will be the head of that. Perhaps, as I start to finish up here, perhaps the strongest reason for the rejection of the temple stemmed from a belief that it was not built to the specifications that God had provided. A lot of the people saw the temple as, wow, this is not how God originally meant it for it to be. We had to go back to how Moses, received the true shadow of the sanctuary in heaven. And so we see a movement of the Jews wanting to restore, wanting to rebuild the temple according to a pure, godly way. Now, the reasons for these things, I believe that this gives a lot more significance to when Jesus came into the temple and says, I will destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Now, the writers say that he spoke of his body, but to the listeners at that time, when he said, I'm going to destroy this temple and build it up again, perhaps what was in their mind was not just confusion like, oh, he's going to die or something, but rather thoughts of, Jesus is basically proclaiming himself as Messiah. He's going to be the one who restores the temple to the way it was meant to be. So these historical backgrounds to the temple and the thought about the temple during this time, I think give some more questions that can provide thoughts for further study. For example, what is the significance then when Paul and Peter talk about Christ being this head cornerstone and the church body, the people, being this temple that is built up towards God, where God can dwell in his temple, in his church, the people? Is Paul and are these writers saying that, look, Jesus did accomplish these apocalyptic, prophetic fulfillments in the creation of the Christian church? Or is there something still that, are we still looking for a temple, an Ezekielian temple? I think the answers may be found, the studies may find profit in looking at the book of Revelation, where we see these temple themes very explicitly and specifically talked about. Remember, at the end of chapters 20 to 22, when we're talking about the new earth, we're seeing a New Jerusalem come down, but there is no temple there. After all these things are done, there is no temple there, and because God will dwell with his people in Jerusalem. So is that saying that because there's no temple in the new age to come, has that temple that's talked about in these prophets in the Old Testament, has that temple been established already? These are questions to be asking. I haven't yet studied what Hebrews says about the temple and its significance in connection with this new temple and this kingdom of the Messiah in connection with the heavenly temple. I'm not sure if they're two separate things or not, but I definitely see this as something to study out more. And lastly, I think it gives a deeper insight into our foundational Adventist theology, that the temple talked about in the New Testament and also Revelation is not just referenced there so that we can come back and say, hey, check it out, we have a heavenly sanctuary, and therefore all of our doctrines are correct. I think the heavenly sanctuary doctrine has much more significance and meaning, and there's been conflict about the heavenly sanctuary we've heard of Desmond Ford and people like that questioning the foundations of the sanctuary, and questions about the daily. A lot of the conflicts within Adventist history have to do with the sanctuary. And I believe that as we take in the context of what sanctuary meant, what temple meant to the people in Jesus' time and people in the Bible writers' times, we may have a better understanding of what temple means for us today.